What's up guys, KS here. Thanks for joining me today as always. We've been broadening our horizons here on the channel of late, featuring ARs, PDWs, and higher tier firearms like the Wilson Combat EDC X9, and it has been a blast. Today is no different. As you know, we took a look at the STI Staccato C earlier in the year, and I was impressed. Mostly. Check out the video for my thoughts on that when you get a chance, but I knew there had to be something more up my alley from STI. Enter the Staccato P. It's a double-stack steel and polymer hybrid in the same vein as its little brother, but in a larger form factor. To me, the Staccato P falls into a do-all category. It has the potential of being carried, maybe running in competition, home defense, general range hijinks, or even a collection piece. With a heavily textured grip, Magwell, below 4-pound trigger, and Dawson Precision fiber optic sights, the P is fully loaded and ready to play. Let's dive in and see if the STI stands out in the crowd. Alright, let's do a couple of quick side-by-sides with the STI. Now guys, you're going to have to pardon me, I do have a little bit of a cold, so if I sound a little bit stuffed up, I do apologize for that. But not too long ago, we did a review on the Wilson Combat EDC X9, and I'll tell you what, I fell in love with this thing. Now, this is a loaner from my buddy Harry over at Harry's Holsters. I do have a code down below in the description if you guys are curious about that and want to check out his holsters. I recommend you do so. But we had a great time comparing these two. Now, of course, I don't want to ram these guys together because, again, that Wilson Combat is not mine. So the STI is going to be on the bottom, and I did pretty much all of the measuring myself on this because STI really doesn't report it, or at least doesn't report it anywhere convenient to find. So the overall length, and that really is beaver tail to the end of the slide, is 8 inches almost exactly. And the height on it, and again, I got to kind of move these guys around a little bit. Sorry for all the wobbling. But we're talking roughly 6 inches tall, so it is a tall gun for sure. Now it's going to be 1.5 inches wide. It's actually very similar to the Wilson Combat in that regard. The Wilson's just a little bit wider than that. And the barrel length on the STI is 4.15 inches. Now the weight on it is going to be 36.15 ounces, and that is unloaded with the empty magazine in it. So this thing is a heavy firearm for sure. But as I said in the original Wilson video, these guys stack up very well. Now, one other gun I bet you guys are curious about in terms of how it stacks up to the STI is going to be something like this Glock 19. Now, this is a Gen 5 MOS, so we'll throw these guys together for just a moment or two and see how they stack up. Now, of course, again, the Staccato P, they say, is certainly a very carryable firearm. Now, Glock 19s are uber carryable, no doubt about that. They actually stack up pretty well. Now, the Glock, of course, does not have the beaver tail, and that's going to add a fair amount of length to that STI. So you'll have to make up your mind whether that's something that could be a printing issue, what have you. But with 1911s, it really is kind of standard fare, of course. And then height, there's actually a pretty significant difference between the two. And, of course, width there definitely is. So the Glock's going to be more petite all the way around. It also weighs, I don't know, 23, 24 ounces, something like that, versus, again, the 35, 36 ounces on the STI. But an interesting matchup nonetheless. All right, we're going to take a walk around the Staccato P here in just a moment, but before we do, I wanted to take a look at the magazines and show you these. It does come with two. Now, this is a 17-round magazine, as you can see. Sorry about the glare on that. These are darn shiny, but it's very interesting design. They seem like very high-quality magazines. Now, it also came with a 21-round magazine of similar design. Now, these magazines are going to go for around 50 bucks, at least on the STI website. They do have longer magazines. I don't remember the amount of rounds. You guys are going to have to holler down below on that. They're going to be more expensive. They're going to be roughly around 80 bucks for those. So definitely pricey magazines. But you know, if this is going to be something that you run with, whether you're carrying or competing with, investing in some extra magazines is probably going to be really important to you. So again, something to consider. Now, in terms of the grip, this is going to be a tree bark grip texture or stipple pattern. And the very interesting thing about this, all of this is polymer. So it's going to be really a polymer and a steel blend. We'll kind of point out parts that are steel here in just a moment. But I have to say, I love the texture on this. I think it's fantastic. Now, if it's going to be rubbing up against your skin or anything, if you're carrying it, it's probably going to irritate you a little bit. But in terms of shooting it, it's a fantastic experience. And it goes all the way around. It really does look like a custom stipple job, but it's all built into the frame. Very interesting indeed. Now, I know you can get different frames for these firearms, some, I think, aluminum frames, something like that, and I hear they are extremely expensive, like $600, something like that. So I would stick with this. It's designed for the gun and it runs quite well. And you'll notice there's also a magazine here. It's very interesting. There's a nice cutout here to strip out the magazine if you have any malfunctions or anything like that. But a very interesting magwell nonetheless. And it does a good job. I mean, it's got a nice sweeping port in there. It's hard to see, of course. It's always hard to capture these on camera. But again, a really nice job with that. Now, as we move up the frame, of course, we do have our grip safety here. It's pretty standard for 1911s. It gets right out of the way, and it's got a nice memory hump on it. Not a big deal at all. Now, one thing I do want to point out, you guys will notice, here's where the steel all starts. All of this is steel as we move up here. There are a couple of little points, this guy right here, and the same thing on this side. These are actually a little bit sharp, and when I was spending time just dry firing and handling the firearm, I really thought, because it sits right in the web of your hand, that these would be incredibly irritating. But and I'll talk more about this in the shooting experience. It turned out really not to be the case so much. So kudos to STI. Apparently they really kind of do know how to design firearms, and you guys are probably going to laugh at that. Now, of course, this is single action, so it does have the thumb safety. It is ambidextrous. It is on both sides. Always hard to capture that, even with all the light in here. But these safeties are articulate. They work really well, really responsive, very tactile. They've got nice paddles on them as well. So very easy to run those. And of course you would carry this cocked and locked, as you guys know for sure. And then we do have our magazine release button. It is not ambidextrous, nor can you swap it, it looks like. So you guys will have to holler again down below if there are any lefty options for a firearm like this. I really don't tend to investigate that because I'm right-handed, so forgive me for that one. And then we do have our takedown lever. I'll be debating whether taking this one down, because just like the STI Staccato C, it is a chore to take down. So we'll have to kind of see how we're feeling a little bit later. And as we move up the frame, of course, we do have an accessory rail for your lights, lasers, chainsaws, all that good stuff. And it is a really good size accessory rail, 1913 Picatinny. So you can really hang a lot of stuff off of this. The options are kind of endless there. And then again, there's a little bit more polymer here in front of the trigger guard. We've got a little texture in front of it as well. It's very nice. It's very cool if that's something that's meaningful to you, if you use that as a reference. I don't, but some people do. And a nice cutout as well. I mean, this really is a very custom looking firearm. I mean, the frame, there's a lot going on, this grip texture and all of that, but I think they've put it together very well. Much like the frame, the slide has a lot of stuff going on as well. Now, right off the bat, you guys will notice that there are some pretty deep slide serrations on here. And I have to say, not only do they look good, but they are extremely functional as well. I think they break up the slide very nicely. But again, uber usable. That's not a problem at all. And we'll take a look at the other side as well. Just the same thing there. You'll notice the American flag on the frame. That's pretty cool. I like that. I like the way they did that. Staccato P, of course. But again, those serrations are fantastic. And then on top of the slide, of course, we do have our Dawson Precision front fiber optic sight. It's a great sight. I like this. I'm not as big of a fan of fiber optics as I am of HD night sights, of course. But this still absolutely does the job. And then the rear sight does have some great serrations. It's all blacked out otherwise. It's a good sight lineup, especially for taking precision shots. And then it does have a nice ledge on it for one-handed manipulations, if that's something that's important to you. No glare-reducing serrations on the top or anything like that. I didn't notice that to be any sort of an issue at the range. That wasn't a problem. And I think largely those are for aesthetics, unless you're outside and it's really bright, something like that. But again, the slide is very well put together. It's very laid out. I like the way they did it. All right, guys, we're going to brave the rapids and break down the Staccato P. Forewarning, I will not make this look very good at all. Now, one thing, it did come with a couple of little gizmos here, these little plastic pieces, and these can go on the guide rod to hold that spring down, to relieve pressure on it. I've used those a couple of times. They're a little bit finicky, they're a little bit difficult to get in there. You can actually do all of this by hand, and one other thing to show you, oftentimes with bull barrels, there will be a tiny little hole somewhere on the guide rod. You can put a paper clip or other device. They oftentimes come with a little tool that will also hold the guide rod back and compress the spring a little bit. This doesn't have anything like that in it. So you do kind of have to wing it just a little bit. Although, again, that's not that big of an issue. So what I do is I actually line the gun up to where the little hole on the slide matches your slide release or your takedown lever, whichever, and I start pushing from the other side on this little button right here. And that's going to catch your slide. And now if I relieve a little bit of pressure as I take this out, I've got to be able to get my fingernail in there. I might have to push this in a little bit more. There we go. And then I should be able to slide this out without a problem. Now, this slide tends to want to come forward just a little bit more than maybe something like that Wilson Combat we took a look at a couple of weeks ago. But again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to actually hold on to it like this, and I'm going to push the slide off just like this, and that is going to keep our recoil spring and guide rod in place. Now, here's where a lot of people who have these firearms are probably going to give me trouble, because I did not relieve the pressure on the spring. That's not the end of the world. You can do this without it. I've done it successfully multiple times. And I just pull the guide rod and spring assembly out of the firearm. It does not harm anything, whatever. Again, it's not necessarily the best way to do it, but you're not going to hurt anything at all. And then we do have a little cap here, and this just holds your spring assembly in there in place. And you guys will notice it's fairly dirty. I just cleaned this thing, so there's going to be a little bit of extra oil, so we will definitely get messy. So we're going to push our lug down like this, and the barrel itself will just pop out of the firearm. We have to line this up, of course, but it will come out. And I wanted to give you guys a look at the bull barrel. Man, this thing is a tank. I love barrels like this. I think they're cool looking, and they're big. They are substantial barrels, no doubt about that. Now, of course, we'll take a look at our slide, and it's relatively standard fare. Now, this seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, even though I like 1911s, I feel like I know a little bit about them. I don't know everything, but it's more kind of along the line of a Series 70. It does not have the safety plunger. It's not the I guess, drop-safe design that we're used to with the Series 80, although this is still a safe firearm, no doubt about it, but just something that I noticed. But otherwise, the cleaning and maintenance on this is extremely easy. It's easy to get into all the nooks and crannies, that sort of thing. So didn't prove to be any sort of an issue. Here, we'll make this look really bad on camera. And then we've got our rails here, very substantial rails, quite a bit of surface there. And again, it all cleans up very nicely, not too big of an issue there. So that's your breakdown of the Staccato P, and we will get this thing put back together. All right, a little pause there as I not only wiped some oil off my hands, but also laughed at myself for ramming some of the parts together. You know, that's how it works as we make videos. It is what it is. But we just slide our barrel back into the slide just as it came out. I'm going to put the lug back up again. It's going to make getting that recoil spring and guide rod insertion a little bit easier. We'll get our cap in there as well, and that should seat without too much of an issue. There we go. So that's going to sit just like so. Always interesting to capture that stuff on camera. And then we're going to get our guide rod and spring assembly back in here. And again, this will work. It will go back in without too much of an issue. You'll see it popped right back in. Now I'm going to hold this in place. So again, reversing the process of disassembling it. And then I'm going to get my frame back on the slide just like so, and I will slowly release that guide rod and spring assembly back in there. So everything is being held together as you would expect. And the next thing we need to do is line up our hole. Sometimes you have to kind of jimmy the thing around a little bit to make sure everything lines up properly, but eventually... All right, I had to cheat and take it off camera for a moment or two so I could see it a little bit better. Again, I'm looking through not only a camera monitor, but also under the camera as well, which is always a little bit of a trick. But we're going to get our lever right there, and it will eventually just kind of fall into place, which is good. So you can avoid that idiot scratch that's swiping the lever here against the frame of the gun. You don't want to do that with 1911s. And then we'll reverse the process again. I'm going to just go ahead and take the slide and slide it back. And bang, back in, and we are in business. There you go. There's the disassembly of the Staccato P. Again, I don't make that look very good, guys, but that methodology will work. The shooting experience with the Staccato P was one of the funnest I've had in a while. Okay, there were a few flyers and a tactical flinch or two because I rode the slide stop and didn't allow for last round hold open. But that's on me, not the STI. The aggressive polymer grip locks your hand firmly in place, and the magwell gives you just enough leverage to ensure the muzzle stays flat. Very flat. Weighing in at roughly 36 ounces, the recoil impulse is barely there, making for an all-day shooter. Along with the recoil impulse, one of my favorite things about shooting 9mm 1911s or 2011s is the pronounced slide cycling that you feel. You can appreciate just how smooth the slide action is every time you pull the trigger. I know that sounds odd, but seriously try one out and pay close attention. You'll feel it. The sights proved to be point of aim, point of impact at normal distances, and the front post was reasonably bright, even though I tend to prefer HD night sights. Although we'll look at the trigger in a moment, I will say that it's light and predictable, and begged to go fast. One thing I was concerned about during shooting are the overly sharp angles just behind the thumb safety, but during shooting, I hardly noticed them. I have to say, guys, STI put together a fantastic platform, and I can't wait to get it back out to the range. Let's take a look at the trigger of the Staccato P for a moment or two. I'm really excited to show you guys this. Now, right off the bat, you'll notice this is a polymer trigger similar to the Staccato C. It is adjustable, and it's got some nice little serrations on the front of it. It's actually a really good trigger, and it feels much more substantial than perhaps it looks. But then we've got our take-up right here. Look at that. That is all the take-up we have. It's very smooth getting to your wall. And then there's our brake, and our brake is coming in at 3.13 ounces very consistently on the gauge. I mean, man, it is fantastic. And then our reset. There's your reset. Look at the travel on that. I mean, the travel is almost non-existent. Of course, we'll do this a couple more times. We've got our take up to the wall. There's your brake. Oh man, that brake is fantastic. And then our reset right there. There's your follow-up. I said in the shooting experience that this trigger really begs the gun to go fast. I meant every word of it. This thing is a screamer. So guys, what do I think of the STI Staccato P overall? Overall, I absolutely love it. There is a lot to like with this between the grip texture, even though it's polymer, and I know some people will have a problem with that. As soon as you pick it up, that just goes away. You don't even think about that anymore. The magwell, we've got the 17 and 21 round magazines that come standard with it. You've got a great sight picture with those Dawson fiber optics and blacked out rear sights. The overall design, the diamond-like coating on the slide, it is just a tremendous package overall. Now, we haven't talked price yet, and this is coming in just under $2,000. And if you go with the optic version, it's going to be $2,500. So I'll tell you, this thing is definitely expensive, no doubt about that. But I believe oftentimes you get what you pay for. And in this case, I actually think it's true. I think this is worth pretty close to $2,000. Others may disagree. I totally appreciate that. Either way, the STI Staccato P is a fantastic firearm, and if you have the opportunity to run one, I highly recommend you do so. Now guys, be sure to leave a comment down below. Let me know your experience with STI or other firearms like that. I always love hearing those types of things, and that's where I get a lot of my inspiration and suggestions directly from you guys, so I'm looking forward to that. Otherwise, thanks so much for joining me, and I will see you next time.